Some brands offer you low finance, or cashback, or servicing.
Renault don't do ors. We do ands. The Renault Kadjar with 1.91% APR and €1,000 cashback and 3 years servicing, saving you thousands. Renault, the brand with the ands. Visit your local Renault dealer. Finance is made under a hire purchase agreement. Terms and conditions apply. Deposit required. Subject to lending criteria. See Renault.ie.
Hey, this is James Arnold Taylor, voice actor, the voice of
Yabba Dabba Doo, Fred Flintstone,
Johnny Test, who's 11 years old and totally awesome,
Ratchet from Ratchet and Clank, Tidus from Final Fantasy X. Oh, yes, and of course, Obi-Wan Kenobi. It wouldn't be Coffee with Kenobi without yours truly. The Force is strong here indeed. Previously on Coffee with Kenobi.
My next one, wouldn't be anything if I didn't bring up Anakin.
I was wondering. I thought, do we have the right Becca on?
This is James Arnold Taylor, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi. I have a good feeling about this.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to show number 139 of Coffee with Kenobi, your spoiler-free place for Star Wars discussion, analysis, rhetoric, and the best travel tips this side of the galaxy. I'm your host, Dan Z, drinking One Nation coffee out of my episode 8, which of course is The Last Jedi, but as I said, I'm drinking One Nation coffee out of it because you can't have a morning without One Nation coffee, right? On CWK, I invite you to join me as we think about the mythology of Star Wars in a whole new way and maybe laugh a little bit in the process. You are absolutely among Star Wars family as we go to our favorite coffee shop and talk some Star Wars. On today's show, Amiyrah Martin and Jared Cantor join me as we talk about growing up Star Wars and what it's like to raise Star Wars fans, as well as how we were raised as Star Wars fans. Plus, we're going to talk about the Star Wars Resistance trailer, which broke recently and has set the internet ablaze with the exciting new animated series from Lucasfilm focusing on the era of The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi. It's the sequel trilogy, and it's our first major look at this lore besides the films. I mean, of course, we have the books and we have some comics, but this is going to be more of a deep dive, and we haven't had anything like this for this era, so it's very, very exciting. Then we'll also talk about what we're going to let our kids attend in 2019 and how do you decide something like that. So pull up a chair, grab your favorite coffee mug, and let's have some coffee with Kenobi.
And now, let's see what's brewing in the Star Wars universe this week.
Star Wars Resistance is so fresh in our minds, and I was very, very excited about writing a script for a breakdown of the new trailer for IGN that I posted over Saturday. IGN shared it. It was very exciting. It was something I put together shortly after it came out, and they reached out to me, and we made that happen. It's really, really cool. The process, I'll have to share with you sometime how that came to be. But I must say it was quite a thrill to hear a professional actor reading my text, analyzing this new trailer. Very, very exciting. Thank you so much to everyone for your positive feedback and comments. Now, let's get on to our show.
So who talks first? You talk first? I talk first.
Joining us today for a cup of coffee is I don't even know what your title is, the overall guru of everything wonderful on the internet, Amiyrah Martin?
I'll take it.
Okay, of course, of Four Hats and Frugal, and she is a fellow Target commercial actor from our Rogue One excitement from a few years ago.
This is true.
Yes, it is true. And your son, she was seen in the commercial with her son, and you have such a wonderful voice, a very strong presence in your voice. Every time I watch the commercial, I just really like how you're just a very, very good orator.
Oh, thank you. I will take that. Maybe one day, voice actor. Let's put it in the universe.
Let's do it. Let's do it. Also joining us today is another a person with dulcet tones in their voice, Mr. Jared Cantor.
Good evening, everyone.
Welcome back, Jared. Good to have you on the show. As always, we are going to talk mostly on the show about growing up Star Wars. It was an exciting little topic, I think, that is timely that Amiyrah and I were chatting about. But before we get to that, the big news of last week, and of course it dropped after we released our last show, but that's fine. I'm glad that Star Wars continues to give to us. But Star Wars Resistance released a 1-minute trailer, and I think we need to talk about that a little bit. So, Amiyrah, we'll start with you. What were your overall reactions to the trailer?
I mean, I have kids, so obviously any new cartoon that I can give them that is Star Wars themed immediately makes me happy. So I absolutely loved that factor. I'm excited because obviously we've noticed that as we're getting these new facets of our favorite topic, that they are putting a lot of little spoilers or Easter eggs or storylines that can interconnect between all of the things that we love about Star Wars. So, via the books, the shows, the films that are coming out. So as a longtime fan, I'm excited to see what we may learn through Star Wars Resistance. And, I'm excited because I have a almost 4-year-old and I know he's going to love it and sit and watch it. So I think that's pretty cool. I think that's pretty awesome that it's going to be right on Disney Channel. And we get yet another thing to keep us occupied while we wait for another film to be released.
That's exactly right. Jared, what about you? Your overall reactions?
I think it looks beautiful. I'm always excited for Star Wars geared towards different audiences. This coming from the guy, as we'll talk about later, who buys essentially all the Star Wars children's books, even if I don't read them with my son yet, because I guess it's hard to describe, but I find it really interesting how you can do Star Wars on so many different levels. And I think that's one of the great things about what George created was that, I know, Dan, you've talked about before, you don't necessarily want a really dark, edgy Star Wars, but you could certainly do that. And then at the same time, you can split the baby kind of in the middle and do a Rebels, which started pretty light but got very serious. And then here's something where I'm very excited to see, is this very oriented towards children? Do they not ever mention the Force, or do we not see anyone, kind of like Rebels, do we never see anyone really getting shot? Is the violence really at a minimum and it's more of a lighthearted story, even though there's serious overtones? Or like Disney movies, do they kind of get enough in there for the adults to where, the kids pick up on a lot, but not necessarily everything, and there's enough there to keep the adults coming back on a week-by-week basis, even for the non-hardcore fans, just your kind of typical fan who probably watched a bunch of Rebels, most of the Clone Wars, and maybe is eyeing this a little cautiously in terms of, is this for me?
Right. Well, you mean like do you remember the old G.I. Joe cartoons where every time someone was blasted, they jumped out in a parachute? Although I love that cartoon so much, I can't even get myself started. We'll derail the whole show. I love this trailer, and I think the reason I loved it is because I loved it. When I saw the first images and the first stills from Resistance, it didn't do much for me. I'm not a huge anime guy, so I didn't really know. I mean, of course, I thought I'd give it a chance because it's Star Wars and it's Dave Filoni, and you can't really go wrong with that combination. But I was very pleasantly happy overall, which leads to the tone. Amiyrah, when we think about the tone, what do you think this is as far as the audience or kind of the style that they're going for?
Well, I mean, it was only a minute, so I had to repeatedly watch it to kind of get an idea of where it may fall in terms of if we're looking at a preteen thing or, more of an elementary school type deal. I feel like they may be going towards the preteens with this one. I don't know if they've caught that audience just yet. I mean, we had, Freemaker Adventures, which was it was a fun one to watch because it's Legos, Star Wars. But I think that was geared towards a younger audience. I think this time they're trying to bridge that gap. Like that's the age where, they could totally watch Clone Wars now. And start to really get into it. And, they didn't watch Rebels and they're looking to kind of maybe gear away from the darker areas that we got into, and just kind of bring them back to that that hopeful part of Star Wars. So I'm thinking maybe preteens. I'm thinking that's what they're trying to go towards. So that way parents have something to sit down and watch with their preteens. Because, they want to watch what they want to watch at this point. But I kind of feel like that might be what they're going towards with Resistance.
I could see that as well. Jared, did you get a similar impression?
Yeah, and I think, from the commentary that I've read and seen, a lot of people, and, being a parent, my short-term memory is kind of shot, but a lot of people are saying, oh, this very much reminds them of the early Rebels promotional stuff and how it didn't necessarily completely accurately describe even really what we got at the beginning, let alone, multiple seasons where things, your audience matures. And so you can continue to cater to them as they mature, but not going so mature that you can't, bring in a young child to Rebels right near the end. And I think we'll get that here. Certainly my biggest kind of internal speculation is this really meant to just be kind of a 1-season, 2-season gap to just get us to the Disney streaming service era? Or do they certainly have a longer term story to tell here?
I thought about that as well. I wonder what they have in mind. I do know, and I believe this was in an interview that Dave did. He is not overseeing the day-to-day on this show. He helped kind of get it kicked off and started. He's credited as being the creator of it. But so I don't know exactly if that is an indicator or a litmus test of how long it's going to last for. Dave's energy, I'm assuming, is focused primarily on Clone Wars coming back, which is, again, such a wonderful thing to be able to say out loud. So I thought the tone was interesting, too. I see what you're both saying about it. It kind of bridges the gap. I mean, it does have some heaviness. It does use a lot of some silly, playful humor and sort of the Three Stooges stuff. And actually, there's an IGN video out there that breaks down the trailer in a lot of detail, written by a certain caffeinated Coffee with Kenobi podcast host you may have heard of, where we talk about that quite a bit. I spent a lot of time watching this trailer because of that thing for IGN. Noticing was the balance. I mean, you've got some friendships that are going to be valued, which is a very much an archetype of Star Wars and all mythology, good, strong mythology. And you've got some playful moments, but you also got some heavy. I mean, if just the nature of the fact that there is going to be espionage and having to lie. I mean, he flat out says, I don't want to know about your spy stuff. So you're going to have to lie to your friends. I mean, that's a pretty heavy thing. But I have a feeling they're going to present it in such a way that it will, in fact, hit all those beats. And I agree with you, Jared, about how the great thing about this mythology that George Lucas has created is that it seems to be able to reinvent itself and appeal to many different people. And what about these characters? Amiyrah, and again, I know it was just a really short, quick hit, and we don't really have much to identify it on, but is there anything that stood out about any of these characters for you?
I actually love that you mentioned the espionage, because I felt like that as soon as we found out that, one of the main characters is going to have to, or basically is a spy, I thought back to a little bit of kind of a Rogue One-esque ideal, and how are we going to actually hear a storyline with that and keep it light? I don't know how they're going to do that. So I think that's probably the one thing that really stood out. I didn't go deep into the characters too much. I wanted to see kind of the overall feeling of what I think this might be like. And if I'm going to have discussions with my kids after each episode, like it started to get with Rebels and Clone Wars sometimes. But I don't have a feeling where we're going to get too deep or dark with any of these characters. And I don't know if that's a good or bad thing. I'm still trying to think if, as a fan, am I okay with that? Because I do love a good dark character to balance out the light. But I don't want to have a extremely dark character in terms of them going towards the audience that we're kind of thinking they're going towards. Right. So I don't know. I really don't have an opinion just yet about, sure, character depth or anything like that. I'm interested to see how they're going to present the characters to us, if they're going to really get deep with any of them, or is it just going to be mostly surface level?
Right. And I have a feeling that it's going, I think it's going to get pretty profound, but I don't think we're going to go to like Anakin Skywalker Hamlet territory or anything like that. But I do feel like eventually it's going to happen, because that seems to be what we really like. Even Forces of Destiny on occasion hit upon some interesting character stuff, and not all the time, but just enough to kind of tantalize and to get us talking. Is there anything about the characters for you, Jared, that stands out? I know it's just a very small sample size, but I've got my English teacher hat on, so we got to pour in here.
It's definitely a very small sample size. I think what
not enough for people to complain about it, because that wouldn't happen.
Star Wars
I say that?
never.
Sorry. Yeah.
I think what I'm most interested in is to what extent, maybe because the age group that this is somewhat geared at, does this fall into any kind of tropes? Or, I was reading one thing and it hadn't even occurred to me yet, but it was talking about speculation that the main character, Kaz, is his romantic interest going to be that other female pilot? And I was just thinking, boy, we're already the shipping is already.
Oh dear.
And Dan, I know you've spoken very eloquently before on prior episodes about the kind of danger and just this immediate rush to. At some point, there has to be a pairing, because that's the only way that the characters can work, and that they can't stand alone, or be agnostic about a relationship. And so I'm kind of hoping here that, even though maybe that would be somewhat typical, that Disney just finds ways to buck things here, maybe to have we see some alien background characters, maybe that they don't just be background characters. We have persons of color who seem to have important roles, but it's not quite clear yet, how central they'll be. And I'm really hoping that, Disney or Lucasfilm, not pushes things, but, does something a little bit unexpected here.
If there's one thing that I think Star Wars has taught us, especially since Disney took over, is that it's not predictable, and it is able to establish a galaxy where everyone is invited to the table, right? Everyone is welcome. There's strength, there's diversity, there are challenges, there are obstacles, but there are opportunities for everyone to get a chance to identify. And I think that, as a teacher and as a parent, I think that's fabulous. Amiyrah, are you getting the same kind of feeling as well?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think that they're taking the opportunity to give us a varied amount of characters, and have, even though it's in a galaxy far, far away, have people who look like your audience see themselves, they get to see that character on a big screen. That's a big deal. And Disney has been, I feel like that's just what Disney has decided to take on, especially over the last 15, 20 years, really. They have gone to task with making sure that everyone is represented. It's very refreshing to see that even with this such a big, iconic following, and just something that has been such a big part of the lives of many people, that they're not going to sit on that. They're actually going to give us something new to look at, give us something to connect to. That's different than what we've seen, in 4, 5, and 6, which is pretty cool.
Absolutely. Couldn't have said it any better myself. Let's go ahead and take our first break. When we come back, we'll finish looking at Star Wars Resistance and dive into our main topic about growing up Star Wars and parenting. This is Coffee with Kenobi.
This is Coffee with Kenobi. Oh, pass the cream, would you?
In what is rapidly becoming my favorite portion of this show, I'm going to play for you a clip from our CWK Pour Over Patreon exclusive show. This week's show, myself, Tom, and Corey Club talked more about Comic-Con because there's just so much Comic-Con material out there. But we looked at the Aquaman and Shazam trailers, which are really, really interesting. So I'm happy to share a clip of that with you. But before I do, I have to thank our CWK Patreon family members, without whom none of this would be possible. Ben Elkington, Rebecca Raven, Dennis Keithley, Terry Lee, Wayne Booker, Aaron Harris, Chris Gavarka, Angela Sauce, Mediocre Jedi, Phil Pecaro, Tim Bungaroth, Chris Metz, LJ Souter, Thea Selby, Jeff Ellis, Daz Davies, Christian Dale, Jason Hall, Brian McKinney, Connie Shee, Mike Audette, Jared Cantor, BJ Smith, Eric Struthers, Nick Deco, and Mark Suter. Without all of your wonderful generosity, we cannot do any of these things we want to do on Coffee with Kenobi. You help to add new dimensions to the show, and we thank you so very much. And for $5 or more a month, you can be a part of our CWK Patreon family, and you'll have access to our exclusive CWK Pour Over, which I mentioned at the top of this promo. And now, speaking of CWK Pour Over, without further ado, here is a clip from this week's show.
No, which just never was one of my favorites. And you know my feeling about water stories. And
what?
And it's
what's your favorite water stories?
When we talked about the Meg.
Oh yeah.
And how I just don't like underwater stories. I mean, even when it came to the Gungans and whatnot, it's not that I had any hatred toward the Gungans. It was just underwater stuff.
This is going deep. This is real deep.
So you don't want to scuba dive with me, you're saying?
No, I don't want to scuba dive.
I'm certified. Did you know that? Yeah.
I did. Yeah. That doesn't.
I'm not certified, so don't swim with me. I'm not. I won't need any help.
No, but I really liked the characterization of Aquaman as such a powerful character, whereas I've never seen him that way. And you know, to take his counterpart in the Marvel world, I've never been a fan of Namor either.
Namor is sort of a kind of a barbarian bully. He doesn't seem very multidimensional.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. But so first impression, both movies actually looked pretty enjoyable and are movies that I don't know that I'll see them in the theater, but I definitely will watch them. The only thing I didn't like, do you want me to go here or you want to save this?
Go for it.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. The only thing I didn't like is the lightning bolt in the costume. Looks like there's a light bulb inside of it.
Okay, I saw that costume because they had it on.
Yeah.
Is it a lot cooler in person?
No, it's great. It's super cool. It's very unique.
Good.
Very unique.
Oh, you saw it in person?
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of fun.
That changes it. Yeah.
That was awesome. Yeah, but it was behind glass. This was before the trailer had even debuted, and I saw the costume in the middle of this huge DC area, and I was very impressed. Shortly after that, Corey goes into some discussion about the Shazam trailer and what his kids thought about it, and Zachary Levi, who's a big fan favorite. So none of this is Star Wars related, but that doesn't mean the CWK Pour Over doesn't talk Star Wars. We do talk Star Wars. We talk comic books, we talk movies, we talk television, we talk Dungeons and Dragons, we talk pro wrestling, we talk whatever comes up, and we share some insights into what goes on in our families, as well as the making of the show. I know I've given a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff of San Diego Comic-Con that I've not really shared on the regular show. So definitely for $5 more a month, check out CWK Pour Over, and if you have any questions, just let me know, but otherwise you'll find it at www.patreon.com/coffeewithkenobi. One Nation Coffee is the official brew of Coffee with Kenobi. It smells amazing and tastes even better. They even have a subscription service that is really convenient. Be sure to go to www.onenationcoffee.com to order the official brew of Coffee with Kenobi today. We're back, and I really loved hearing both of your takes on the Star Wars Resistance trailer. Before we move on to our main topic, I just want to see, are there any connections to the saga or anything else that you want to talk about? I wrote down a couple things that I thought were important. I thought there were nice little Easter eggs, which, again, I talked about on that IGN video, #shameless plug. And then the animation I was very excited about. As I mentioned at the top of the show, I'm not a huge fan of anime per se, although I've seen, a reasonable amount of it, and I've seen some of the classics, and I respect them. But, you can't like everything. You can certainly try and see what's out there, but it's really hard to, I think, genuinely like everything because there's a lot out there, right? There's a lot of things, different strokes for different folks, as they used to say. So when I saw this, I was very excited. I remember an animated show called Transor Z, which is very anime style thing. And this reminded me of that. I really, really like the look of the new ships. I think there's kind of a hybrid A-Wing, B-Wing thing going on there that I found very exciting. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't really look, it looks like some of the things we've seen on film and in Rebels and Clone Wars, but it also very much does not. And again, the fact that this franchise can refresh and give you new things, but still make it feel like it's a part of this big, beautiful universe, I thought was great. And I also wrote down fun factor. I feel like this is going to be a ton of fun to watch. It may have moments of heaviness, and I prefer things to be heavier just for me as an individual. But I also love having fun. Star Wars at its core should be fun, and I feel like those things were there. So those are the last kind of key things that jumped out to me. Amiyrah, anything else that jump out to you before we move on to our next topic?
Did you? Oh, maybe it was just me, but I got this feeling of kind of a retro thing. Like I felt like when I was watching it, I was watching the older style of cartoons that we used to watch. Like that's what I think that might have struck me as soon as I started to watch it. And I was like, wait a minute, what is this? Like it looked like in a classic Star Wars cartoon, which was interesting to me because, with the developments of obviously animation, they could have gone so many different ways. And I just love that it was a good pop of color, and it seems very bright, which is why I'm optimistic that we're gonna not take it too dark, but it'll stay a little lighter. But I love that I got that feeling, and I don't know if obviously that was probably intentional to kind of have it connect to those who are a little bit older and remember the classic cartoons, but to still make it as animated enough for the younger crowd to kind of connect to it. So I don't know if that was intentional or not, but I hope it is. I hope it was. I really loved that. I got that feeling of, oh my gosh, this reminds me of when I would sit down and watch a Saturday morning cartoon.
Yeah. Oh yeah. How awful is it that there's no Saturday morning cartoon?
I know.
that is not kind to the universe for that to happen. But no, I agree. And I think I got that as well. I thought that was purposeful, that it had that the color and the beauty of it and the fun factor and the joy. It did very much feel like I remember growing up watching Thundercats or watching old cartoons from the late 80s and early 90s, and maybe that dates me, but I'm okay with that. It happened. I got that as well. Jared, anything else you want to talk about before we move on to our next topic?
I'm just really looking forward to, David Collins has really turned me on to the music of Star Wars. Mm-hmm. And one of the great things is, we talk about just more content. But one of the great things really has been with Rebels and Clone Wars is that we've gotten so much more music and fantastic music. And so, with all the great, canon content we're going to get and visuals, I'm just very interested to see what do they do with the music in this, and how does that complement
at all?
Yeah, I was, I don't like to do a lot of Googling around when I'm on a call like this for fear of upsetting the computer gods. But I didn't really remember them promoting or saying anything yet. And I know we've got a ways to go till October. And maybe we'll finally get that credit, but nothing jumped out at me yet. But I haven't done enough digging, so I'm sure someone out there is listening to this and knows the answer.
Nothing's been mentioned yet, but I have a feeling that the answer will be coming soon. Yes.
We'll trust the Force.
Yeah, you should. You should. Yeah, I think we'll find out something pretty soon. All right, very good. So I love that went a little bit more than I expected, but I'm glad because there's a lot of interesting stuff, a lot of interesting promise, and a lot of the things that we kept talking about with our conversation related back to parenting and to children and to watching this potentially with our kids, which leads me to the main topic of the show. And Amiyrah suggested this, and I thought it was a wonderful topic. Amiyrah, kind of explain to me explain to our Coffee with Kenobi family how you came up with this topic, because I think it's one worth exploring.
As a parent and as a Star Wars parent, coming up very soon, we're going to be very busy people. So I figured this would be a good time for us to, review what's happening in 2019, what many of us will be traveling for on an East Coast and a West Coast for a very amazing opening, or two very amazing openings. We have Star Wars Celebration, and being what it is when you're a parent, when you're a Star Wars parent, and you want to make sure that your kids get to have all of these experiences, but you want to be responsible when it comes to all of that. Like, this is a lot. And if we're diehard fans, we obviously want to be at everything. And if we are raising diehard Star Wars fans, we want to make sure that they get to experience all of these things. But, this is a good time to kind of make our game plan and talk about, being a Star Wars parent and what it was like to grow up as a Star Wars kid. And if this coming year is something that is exciting us as that Star Wars kid that we used to be, and how that's going to possibly reflect with our own kids.
What do you mean used to be? Aren't we still Star Wars kids?
Listen, ask your children if they think that you're a kid. I guarantee you they won't give you an answer that you want to hear.
It's true. And I can just see my wife listen to this now, looking at me like, are you serious, Clark? Yeah, exactly. That's a Christmas Vacation reference, everyone. All right, so I think I want to explore that as well. Kind of our parental philosophy and how we incorporate fiction and play into parenting. I heard recently someone talking about the power of fiction, the power of science fiction, the power of stories. And one of the reasons I really like teaching literature is I feel like it is a subject where you are required to empathize with a character. And not every subject can say that. Now, clearly I'm biased, but when you're reading these books, you are walking in the shoes of, or the footsteps of, these characters, and you're feeling the battle and their internal struggles and the things that they face. So you can take fiction and you can address very, very real world things, but under the veil of fiction, you are more inclined to get someone to open their minds to a topic they may not normally feel comfortable talking about or even exploring. And that, I think, is the brilliance of fiction. And my goodness, every show we've ever done on Coffee with Kenobi addresses that in one way, shape, or form. So now we transition into what that means as far as Star Wars and fiction and play. My goodness, even tonight when I was telling my son a bedtime story, I find myself switching the story, and I just make the stories up on the, every night to him. He'll have a request, Daddy, tell me about tonight you want to hear about the Ewoks, and you want to hear about Venom from Spider-Man. The combo we've always dreamed about, Venom and the Ewoks, right? And so I found myself transitioning into talking about situations he's told me about in school, but I switched them, to make it more Star Wars-y, if you will. And so I think there's a lot of richness there, and not only with Star Wars, but just fiction and play. So, Jared, how do you incorporate fiction and play into your role as a parent?
Well, I've got probably on the younger spectrum of the Padawans, my son is not even 3 yet. And so, he's really kind of just coming into the age of what we would really understand as as play and kind of being able to follow narrative stories to the extent that you could do anything other than extremely simple, but not necessarily with Star Wars, but certainly I could see using it. But we have had situations where something might have happened at daycare and we try to talk about it, but using fictional characters that he does relate to, which my son is, a classic boy, planes, trains, automobiles, construction machinery, his life revolves around those type of things. And we will often talk about, if he's been naughty or if one of his little friends, accidentally hurt him, we do kind of talk about it, but using, characters that he knows and their kind of archetypal roles of, this is the helper, or this is the ambulance, or the police car comes and makes sure, that everyone's being safe and behaving themselves. And I think that really will, as he matures, there's the characters in Star Wars, which already he recognizes some of them. And I can see when he's just a little bit more advanced, and like I said, I have all these wonderful Star Wars children's books, when he's able to maybe sit through some of those, to be able to kind of do that, but instead of referencing his favorite fire truck character and police car character, but be able to relate them to Leia or Han or Luke, or when he's more mature, talk about characters like Vader. And I think there's a power in having fictional characters to serve as vehicles to present a message that might not otherwise, that might just come off a little bit too instructional or lecture-y.
Yeah. Didactic.
Yes.
Yeah. Interesting. Amiyrah, what about you?
Well, I have such a diverse age in my house now. We just newly minted a teenager here. So we have a 13-year-old, an 8-year-old, and our baby will be turning 4 in a couple of days. So there's a lot of play, obviously, that goes on in this house. And there's a lot of Star Wars that goes on in this house. And they each respond to it in different ways because they have different personalities. My oldest, my 13-year-old, he is very much into the Star Wars comics. He devours them. And I think the reason why, obviously, he loves the storyline. He loves that that's just his thing. The other two don't really get into them, or they're not into them yet. But he is a kid that constantly wants to do right and wants to emulate his favorite characters or his favorite people just in real life. So he turns to that fiction just to kind of give him an idea of who he wants to grow into as a person. And it's interesting to hear what he takes from them, from the comics, and how we can see him actually doing those things in life, being helpful or becoming angry and realizing it on his own, being self-aware about that. And it was, there was a comic 2 comics ago where there was that situation, or he could have learned from that. So that's kind of where he sits when it comes to, learning from fiction and from play. And my daughter is very tactile. So she will be a Jedi. So she's the one that has the lightsabers and is jumping up and down in their beds and wants to play pretend. And she is the ringleader of the 2. So she'll get the 2 brothers to do whatever she wants to do. And they take on the characters. So she's a very strong-willed girl, which I absolutely love.
Yes.
But that's how she will, take on the storyline of anything that she's really into at the time. Star Wars is really fun to hear them do because all 3 of the recognized characters have their favorites. They know who they want to play, which is really fun. But she is also very vocal. So if she wants to know, is this a right or wrong thing to do and why? So we have a lot of conversations with her about that. And that has surprised me very much. And she talks a lot to her dad, to my husband, about those things. She'll talk to me as well, but because it's dad can really wrap his brain around what she's trying to ask and why she's asking. And they have really deep conversations. And it's funny to hear them talk about Kylo Ren and and the connection to Darth Vader and the way that they act, and why that angers her when she can watch that on the big screen. And they've had really long conversations about that, which is interesting. And then the baby is just, I think that's really, it's cool that it's daddy daughter thing too. But she shocks me with how philosophical she can get at age 8. So I know I have my hands full with that one.
That is so cool. That is so cool. I love that.
And then the baby's the baby. I mean, I love that Jared keeps talking about the books, because that's really where he connects. He loves when we sit and read him the books. That's his thing. He's a black and white kid too, but he, it's right and wrong. And I know that. And already at this age, he's very open to that, but he has an affinity for the quote unquote wrong characters. Like, he absolutely loves Darth Vader. It's his favorite character. He loves Kylo. And I think that's really interesting, because he doesn't like when people do wrong things already at this age. But those are the characters that he just absolutely loses himself over. But I can see that he's already learning from this fictional part that we all love in the house, what right and wrong is, why maybe he likes the wrong, probably because it's nothing like him. And it's going to be interesting to see him progress by, having this be a big influence in his life, because, he absolutely loves everything Star Wars. So it'll be interesting to see how much he's going to actually get into the classic storyline and the newer storylines, and all of the animated series, and what he's going to really take to when it's time to play.
It's very much a gateway into those kind of conversations that we get to have with our kids, because they find these things in these worlds, and they, their brains realize that there's something there. I mean, the human condition. That's the reason that I like Shakespeare, because even though these are fantastical characters or faraway places and they talk differently, at its core, it's still about psychology and how we relate to one another, whether it's his parents or his friends or what have you. This is great. So let's go ahead and take another break. When we come back, we will pick up this conversation. This is Coffee with Kenobi.
Greetings. This is Obi-Wan Kenobi, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi.
Great friend of the show, Randy Therio of Legends Library, sent me a message the other day, and he said, Dan, they have Harry's Razors at Target. And I know, that's exciting. And that is awesome, because Harry's Razors, I've been talking about this for a while, is a wonderful company, an amazing product. And what I love the most about Harry's is that it's a close, clean shave. It's smooth, it's comfortable. It's a very nice handle on the razor blade. And it's hard to explain that, but when you try it, you'll know what I mean. It's just very much a glide on your face. It's fantastic. And I've tried a lot of razors in my life, and this is by far the best. Harry stands behind the quality of their blades, and they also know that switching razors is not an easy decision. So they have created a trial offer, and you can claim yours by going to harrys.com/CWK family. Harry's delivers a close, comfortable shave at a fair price. Their founders were fed up with overpaying for expensive razors with unnecessary features. And they know that a great shave comes down to great blades made with sharp, durable steel that lasts, which is why they bought a factory that's been making some of the highest quality blades in the world for over 95 years. By selling directly to you over the internet, Harry's can offer the blades at a price much lower than the leading brand, just $2 per blade compared to $4 or more. And you have a quality guarantee here. If you don't love your shave, let Harry's know within 30 days and they'll give you a full refund. Now let me give you the details of the trial offer. Get a $13 value trial set that comes with everything you need for a close, comfortable shave. A weighted ergonomic handle, a 5-blade razor with a lubricating strip and trimmer blade, rich lathering shave gel, and a travel blade cover. Listeners of my show can redeem their trial set at harrys.com/CWK family. Make sure you go to harrys.com/CWK family to redeem your offer and let them know I sent you to help support the show. We're back, and we were talking about our parental philosophies and incorporating fiction and play into parenting. And of course, it's with through a Star Wars lens. For me, my son likes the books a lot too. He likes the Golden Books are a big hit around our household, and he's only seen Star Wars and The Empire Strikes Back, but he just turned 5. So I mean, I think fairly soon I'll probably show him Return of the Jedi, and I'm very much looking forward to that. But interestingly, sidebar, it never bothered him that Han Solo was frozen in carbonite, and I said, "You sure? You sure? But he's frozen. He's not going to see his friends." And he goes, "Daddy, they're going to get him. He's a good guy. And he thinks the good guys will always win." And I want him to think that. You know what I mean? I mean, life will have a way of, showing us different things and different things that happen in the world. But I want him to grow up thinking that there is hope, that the good guy will win, that friendship, loyalty, bravery, being selfless, those are all important aspects of the human condition. And I want him to feel that. I want him to put that out into the world too, as we were talking about earlier. And I think that's very, very exciting.
I think it's important to have that foundation before you, not get to reality, but to be able to then kind of grapple with the harder parts of the human condition, if you will, and to be able to hopefully successfully reconcile those two things. I had a history teacher in high school who taught kind of the history that you don't learn about, and relying on people like Howard Zinn and to talk about Japanese internment and things that you just never were presented before. But coming from the background that I had, it didn't kind of shatter me. It was like, okay, well, there is no such thing as a perfect culture or people or country, that there are, or person, and that there's always flaws in there. And sometimes they're very deep and very fatal flaws, but that you have to still have hope and optimism. Otherwise, then you just succumb to that destructive cycle. And I think that's really kind of one of the great things about Star Wars, is that we do, especially after we got the prequels and now we're getting the sequel trilogy, we see the Skywalker saga, and we see a lot of the Anakin part of that. And then we've now seen kind of the Luke part of that. And the question, everyone's hanging on for episode 9 is, what is the Kylo part of that saga?
True. Very true. Another thing too that I think is nice about Star Wars, speaking as a man of faith, is I like the notion and believing in something that you can't see and putting in faith in something outside of yourself, ultimately, which makes you to be selfless. Now, I mentioned this on the show 138, but the most heroic thing that Luke Skywalker does in Return of the Jedi and The Last Jedi is he puts away his weapon. When he fights Kylo on Crate, he doesn't take one single offensive move. It's purely defensive. In Return of the Jedi, he throws away his lightsaber. It's about love. It's about being selfless, and I think Star Wars is very much on the pulse of that.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree with that.
Now, what about when it comes to collecting and toys and things like that? That's tricky, isn't it? Because we want to spoil our kiddos. It's incredibly fun, but there's also a fine line, isn't there? Because, I'm sure, Amiyrah, you run into this a lot as well. There are times when every day feels like Star Wars Christmas at my house, because you'll get things from companies and they want you to look at something or review it or talk about it, and that's great. My goodness, I love it. But at some point, my wife and I had to sit back and think, okay, this is great, and this is, for your podcast and your business, but after a while, do you want your son to think that every day they get new stuff? That's a valid question, isn't it? How do you deal with that, Amiyrah?
Oh my gosh. Truthfully, we don't always open everything that comes into the house because if we did, as you said, we would be in pretty big trouble. But we had to have that conversation very early on. I mean, obviously the almost 4-year-old is still kind of learning how this all works. Because when you're an influencer nowadays, or when you are just a big Star Wars fan, companies, they want to send you fun things. And if you have children in the house, you have to set the ground rules right off the bat. And that's pretty much what we had to do very early on. So the kids knew, okay, so this is coming for mom or dad to review it, to look it over, to, give our opinion of it as Star Wars fans, or this came for you to review it. So they kind of see it as, at this point, they see it as a responsibility more than just, a fun new toy. They know that if this thing is coming into the house and it was mailed to them directly, that means that they, as part of this community, need to, review it, look at it and say, is this as genuine as it could be to whatever it is that they're sending it for, Rebels or clones or whatever it is. Would I tell my friend who's a Star Wars fan to go get this or to ask for this for Christmas? So they have kind of grown into that responsibility, which is really cool. And then in the same token, sometimes we get things in, or I may email and say, hey, we have a birthday coming up. And those are the special things that get saved. And then I make sure to tell them when they open their gift, hey, this is just for you to play with. Because you don't want them to kind of see it, turn this into a burden. You know what I mean? Like, look at it like, oh my gosh, another thing's coming to the house. You want this to still be exciting for them. But as long as you set those ground rules right up front and say, okay, this is why this is being sent, they'll understand. Kids they're pretty brilliant. They know a lot of things. They learn things way faster than we do nowadays. So I think that's probably the key, is to explain to your kids that, or say to them, this is a collectible. So what we're going to do with it is we're going to put it in our special collectible place. And, we're going to have this because we're trying to collect all whatever it is that you as a family are collecting. We do that quite a bit in our family. We have a collection that they know they can't touch. And they're okay with that because they know that this is something that we're doing together as a family. But we've had the discussion. You have to discuss this with them and actually explain to them what it is, what they're responsible to do. And, at a certain time, you will be able to play with it and keep it for yourself. So that's kind of what we've had to do for many years now, is to get them on board first and foremost.
Yeah, the most important thing, and you said that beautifully. You should be a writer, I think. You have this opportunity to have conversations and to really talk to your kids about a myriad topics and different things, and for them to see, some of these things that we get, like you said, some are collectibles, some are just for review or whatever. For Mason, it's become a thing where we say, who are we going to give this to? It's not, because I get it, a lot of stuff where sometimes the things I get either I already have, or quite honestly, it's something that I want to review, but it's something that I need to keep forever because there's only so much space. We have a large attic, and I have a very beautiful podcast studio / office, and I'm very blessed, but there's only so much space. And there are a lot of people who love these things as much or more than I do. So it's very, very fun to give these things, right? Mm-hmm. And so Mason and I, it's become a thing, like, who can we give this to? How much will they like it? So, then he can wrap it, or, he can go and give it to them, or just things like that. And it becomes a really, really fun opportunity, to be selfless.
Love that.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Jared, as a parent also, and you mentioned, I know you've talked about this other times when I've had the good fortune to chat with you, but you've talked about the books, and sometimes you say that you have them and you haven't shared them with your kids yet, which, by the way, I think is totally fine. I think that's great because, you're a person too. But you get the opportunity to share what you love. How important is it to you that your son likes Star Wars?
Well, I'd like to say
question. I already know the answer.
I'd like to say it's important. And, one of the things, the way I kind of describe it is, on the one hand, we're actively raising him through merchandise in the sense that I went out, on Force Friday 2 and got him a giant stuffed, it's more than a foot high porg.
Dude, that's
and
good
he sleeps
parenting.
with that. Yeah, and he has a stuffed BB-8. And a friend of mine asked if it was okay, and we said, fine. It's a little over his age range in terms of small pieces, but he has the Disney toy box figures of Luke and Vader, and he will occasionally have them whack each other with their lightsabers. But for the books, we're, there I kind of see it in just the general concept of introducing Star Wars as something that's in the background or is facilitating something else. So I've used the ABC 3PO and the Obi-Wan 2-3 book, not to say here's Star Wars, but to teach him his numbers and teach him his letters. And that was really successful. And that kind of got him to the point now where he does recognize Luke and Vader and BB-8. And he hasn't picked up necessarily in all the other ones yet, but for some reason those ones really stick out for him. And really kind of next up is, now I do have more of the golden books, and now that I know he's kind of focused on those characters, using those just as part of our normal reading to him routine, but kind of as a sneaky, subtle way of getting in some Star Wars, but still surprisingly, I love the 5-minute Star Wars storybooks, but a lot of the times, the illustrations, especially right before bedtime, I just think are a little frightening for a kid that young. And, when we read other books to him from the library, if the word kill is in there, I switch it to knocked down. It just seems a little hard to, for a 3-year-old to use the words kill. And he really loves superheroes. That kind of comes from his mom, who's a big Marvel fan. And so we get the books from the library, and I'm reading the one right now, I'm the Hulk. And, there's a lot of illustrations in there of the Hulk, punching the bad guys, which I think at a certain age, it's okay and important to that kind of violence. But, even some of the Star Wars books, with Darth Maul, and, there's a lot of fighting. And even though it's good versus evil, it's I kind of look at them, and I look at the illustrations, and I look at the words that I'd be reading to him. And I think, we're going to stick to Little Golden for a while before even, and maybe kind of dance around the Little Golden books that talk about more of the saga stuff. I think we'll stick to the I'm a princess, I can't remember what some of the other ones, I'm a stormtrooper, because he recognizes stormtroopers too.
That is actually an excellent segue into our last segment, because there's plenty I think we can talk about as far as we talked about what we love, but we also need to address what to kind of stay away from. So let's take our last break, and when we come back, we will do just that. This is Coffee with Kenobi.
Coffee, tea, or me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. It's Coffee with Kenobi.
Let's talk about something amazing that has changed my life, and then I'm talking about family dinner time. I'm not a great cook. In fact, I don't know that I'm a cook at all. And fortunately, a lot of the challenges to cooking that I've always run into are eliminated with HelloFresh. HelloFresh is this amazing company. It's a meal kit delivery service that shops, plans, and delivers step-by-step recipes and pre-measured ingredients so you can just cook, eat, and enjoy. They have 3 plans to choose from. What that means is I get to make family dinners fuss-free with HelloFresh's picky eater, kit-tested and approved family plan recipes. It is fantastic because I can enjoy not having to plan dinner, spending money on takeout for an easy night, or worrying about gathering ingredients week after week because HelloFresh takes care of it for you. They believe cooking should be simple and convenient, not a chore. All the ingredients come pre-measured in handy, labeled meal kits so you know what ingredients go with which recipe. And you're not going to spend all night in the kitchen either because the recipes take about 30 minutes and that's it. They are delivered right to your door in a recyclable, insulated package, and it's a subscription service so you can enjoy HelloFresh week after week. You spend less time meal planning and grocery shopping and get that time back to do more of what you love. You get delicious filling meals delivered right to your door every week for less than $10 per serving and free shipping. Just tonight, in fact, we made these Southwestern beef tacos. They have this pepper jack cheese and it comes with the limes. And now let's take my family, for instance. They're teenagers and they can put down the food, and they had these tacos and they love them so much. In fact, they said to me, can we have this next week? Can we have it soon? Of course you can, because HelloFresh makes it easy. And I was very excited. I was proud of myself, in fact, because as I mentioned, I'm not necessarily a cook and I get intimidated easily, but HelloFresh, the way their packaging is and what they send you with the directions, very, very easy to follow with pictures, and it just makes it really, really cool. So let me tell you how you can enjoy HelloFresh and help support Coffee with Kenobi at the same time. For a total of $60 off, that's $20 off your first 3 boxes, visit HelloFresh.com/CWKFamily60. That's CWKFamily and then the number 60. HelloFresh.com/CWKFamily60. It's like receiving 6 meals free, up to 50% off 3 boxes. And once you have made and prepared and enjoyed your delicious meal, feel free to share it online at #HelloFreshPicks and help spread the word about this amazing opportunity for you and your family. Coffee with Kenobi is brought to you by One Nation Coffee, the official brew of Coffee with Kenobi. 4 lifelong friends had this idea that grew into some of the best coffee you will ever have. It smells amazing and tastes even better. Check out www.onenationcoffee.com today to set up a coffee subscription, and be sure to enter the code Kenobi10 to get 10% off your first order. MEI and Mouse Fan Travel is absolutely the way to go when you're going to travel. And I mean, not just Disney World, not just Disneyland, not just a Disney cruise, although all those things are fantastic, I grant you. But if you need to go to Europe, if you need to go to California, Arizona, I could just name any place on this planet, and they can get you there in an amazing way because they have signature service and expert advice, which helps all of us maximize our vacation time and dollar. They help your family enjoy everything the Disney theme parks and the cruise lines have to offer. They help plan every detail and share invaluable tips, whether it's what restaurants to go to, what rides and attractions to think about first, the best airlines, best time of the year to travel. They really are fantastic. So be sure to go to www.mousefantravel.com today and let them know Coffee with Kenobi sent you. We are back, and this has been a very, very rich, fascinating conversation. I really love picking both of your brains about this. One thing, and Jared, you mentioned this rather well before we went to our last break. When I'm reading to my son and I see certain words like kill or fight, sometimes I will change the word to get. You know, he's going to get him or something like that. And I find myself bristling as well because Star Wars, I mean, it's called Wars. I mean, you know, it's pretty much inherent in the title. And I think sometimes we forget that. But Star Wars is violent. I know it's not Game of Thrones. You know, it's not Braveheart. But it is violent. And there is challenge with that, isn't there, Amiyrah?
Yeah, you know what? There's an opportunity for discussion there.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yes.
the way we see it in our house. And I mentioned earlier that our girl, she loves to talk things out. And I think because of her seeing, you know, the films and, you know, obviously seeing the animated series, Clone Wars is her favorite, by the way, which is interesting.
I love it. That's cool.
That is her favorite. But we don't really kind of, you know, shield them, but in the same token, we make sure that if they are watching something that we know is deemed violent, or we don't really read to our youngest anything that's too violent. I mean, he does love the golden books too, but if something does come up, we make sure that we ask them questions behind it, because there's no way for you to shield your kids from everything. We all know that, especially nowadays, there's just so much that's happening and going on. And this is something that our family uses as kind of the lighter part of our lives. We can always relate to Star Wars. We can always talk about the storylines, but we also use it responsibly as parents, because there are so many things that happen in these storylines where we can turn it into an opportunity to chat with them. And then you obviously have to keep it age appropriate. My 3-year-old talking to me about Rogue One is probably not going to happen. Like, that's no way. But my 13-year-old, yes, we can sit down with him and watch it again. And we've watched it many times with him, but, and we can take that as an opportunity to talk about, the murky lines of war, or what resistance really means, and what it really feels like to have hope at the end when you think it's all lost, things like that. So I take Star Wars as the opportunity to just be a little bit more transparent with my kids, to actually have these conversations that otherwise would feel awkward or interesting to start, and even though they're younger, my younger kids, to give them a chance to ask the proper people, mom and dad, what this really means. Like, what is war, Mom? Like, what does that mean? How does that work when we're watching, the film, and, something happens, and they can easily turn around and ask us questions. So we use that as an opportunity to remind them that mom and dad are the people to talk to when things seem a little bit dark and you have questions. And this is kind of an easier way to do that with your kids, because of the Star Wars storylines that we're getting. And even the classic storylines, which totally opened their eyes to a lot of things. But we don't shy away from it, my husband and I. We think that it's our responsibility to have these conversations here in our home, behind our doors first, and use this as a catalyst, which is really cool to do. So that way they don't go to someone who may give them false information, or who may tell it to them in a way that they don't understand. And Star Wars kind of helps them understand.
Yeah, it does translate to real life, doesn't it? And I like how you explain that, and you both said this too. It's about communicating. It's about setting parameters, and you can't shield them from everything, but you can certainly sort of help them figure out how to ingest it and how to kind of process it and make it their own in a good, constructive way. But even with that, I'm sure you still have a way to sort of ease them into it. And there's no one size fits all. There are often, information out there about, is it okay for your kid to see this? Is it okay for your kid to see that? And Amiyrah, you do a great job with that, with not only Star Wars, but other things too. And there are certain things I think that are pretty clear, but it also depends on the maturity of your child, I think, as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and we all know our kids. We all know what they can handle, what they're sensitive to. And as much as we love Star Wars, it's cool to kind of be that fan that can watch it before your kids see it, or watch it and know, okay, this is going to need a conversation after, or you create your own adventure really for your kids. Like, for your sweet little 5-year-old, he's only seen, A New Hope and Empire, which is awesome. So Return of the Jedi, you are easing him into it. And that's a choice that we get to make as fans with kids, is that we know how we want to open up this world to them, and give ourselves an opportunity to kind of see how they react to it, and then know, okay, well, if he reacted this way to watching Empire, maybe we'll have to wait till he's about 10 or 11 before he will see, Last Jedi or something like that. But we know our kids, and this gives us an opportunity to really introduce them to something that we love with our whole heart in a way that we know is comfortable for each child.
Right. And I honestly can say that when Mason was born, one of the very first thoughts, and once I knew everybody was okay and safe, of course, but one of my very first thoughts after that was, I get to show him Star Wars. And I was so excited about that. And shortly after that, after we brought him home, people started saying things to me like, well, what if he doesn't like Star Wars? What if he doesn't like Star Wars? Ho, ho, ho. Wouldn't that be ironic? And sure, I guess. And I do, of course, I want him to like Star Wars in a selfish way. But I truly mean this. I know you would all say the same thing about your kids. Like if my child or my kids don't like Star Wars, that's okay. It's okay if they find something else that they relate to, they resonate with. I mean, of course, I want them to have a healthy appreciation for it. It would certainly make them walking around my house a lot easier. And you can have those conversations and that play. But ultimately, I want them to be happy. I want them to be good citizens of the world. I want them to respect and love their fellow man. And I want them to appreciate difference. I want them to appreciate diversity. And I think Star Wars is a great gateway for that.
Absolutely.
I'm so glad this was the topic because, I'm going to go back and listen to this several times over the coming months because, my son and I are kind of just about to embark on this type of journey because he's just getting to the age where, like I said, he understands pretend and play, and he is able to express himself. And it sometimes amazes me when we have kind of mini conversations about things that aren't completely nonsensical, but that actually make sense, and that he will say things several days later that touch back on something we might have talked about or done. And so I can see in kind of the blink of an eye, 12 months from now, maybe showing him more of the Forces of Destiny episodes and as, laying the groundwork. Since I wasn't raised with Star Wars, this is kind of something I'll be, fumbling through and reading the blogs. And, I think introducing him to just characters essentially out of context, maybe through the Golden Books, very superficial versions of the stories, but then 6 to 8 months from now, the 5-minute Star Wars stories, which right now, as I talked about, sometimes the language and the pictures are a bit much, and sometimes there's just a few more lines of text on a page than he can stand in a without flipping the page to the next part of the story.
Sure.
But this is kind of the magical age of real rapid and constant development. So, if we were having this conversation a year from now, I kind of am curious to see what I would be saying in terms of what he's seen, what he's read. Has he shown interest in this, or does he go down kind of the Marvel rabbit hole and he loves Thor and Captain America? And so I'll lose him to, my wife's side of the house divided.
And that's okay, Jared. We're Marvel fans over here too. So they may flip flop. It's okay. Just take it with a grain of salt.
Same. Yeah, Mason loves Marvel. He loves DC, and it's fun to sort of talk to him about, because his big thing right now is what happens if Superman fights Thanos. I mean, that's a cool conversation, right? And he wants to know those kind of things. He just likes to explore. And it's about versatility. One quick thing before we wrap this up, and there's so many things I wanted to talk about we didn't get to, but that's fine because that just means I'll just have to have you both on another time, I suppose, which would be wonderful. How did you guys handle? I spent a ridiculous amount of time as Mason was growing up making sure he didn't find out that Darth Vader was Luke's father, and I was somehow successful. I don't know how I was. But when we finally got that moment, and I talked about this after Mason saw The Empire Strikes Back, he looked at me right away and he said, "No, that's not true, Daddy. That's not true." because he thought Darth Vader was lying. And I instantly thought that's cool for two reasons. One, that's exactly the reaction I had when I was a kid and I saw it. And also I like him knowing that the bad guy lies. I think that was cool. But Jared, how will you handle that? And Amiyrah, how did you handle that?
That's a good, it's something I have not entirely figured out yet, because certainly with the amount of prequel stuff out there, if we had all touched on when he was not just called Darth Vader, but when he was called Anakin Skywalker, the link would be made. And so I kind of wonder if it will be even possible, unless I completely wall off all of that material or just somehow refer to him as Anakin.
That's what I did. Or I just wouldn't read certain parts of the books.
I'd like to preserve that and see how it works, but I will not be, and this is kind of my just philosophy on raising him with Star Wars, is it's going to be there. I love it. It's the biggest thing that I consume. I'm going to present it to him, but it's not going to be at all kind of, not pushy, but I'm going to be very respectful about his own interests.
Yeah, organic.
And so with regards to that moment, I'll not go to the ends of the earth from keeping him from finding it out. And there's no requirement that if he's at a sleepover and they're going to watch the movie that night, I'm not going to forbid him from going because I want to be there when he sees it. Because I think the real power,
Batmobile, if that happened.
The real power, I think, in that moment, if it's already been quote unquote spoiled for you, is to look at Luke and how he goes through that moment, which when I think, as a fan or as just a person seeing that scene for the first time, it's very much about kind of your internal reaction to that. But I think if it does get spoiled for him, he then has the rest of his life to you relive that each time through Luke.
It's
true. That's the way I've always looked at it, because I don't remember ever not knowing that. But even to this day, whenever I watch that movie and it's my favorite, just that scene, I, just kind of relive that confusion and anger and then kind of sadness realization, which occurs shortly thereafter on the Falcon. Boy, that movie's great. I'd like to watch it right now.
Isn't it so awesome?
It is great. It's the best one.
Just listening to you talk about it, I'm like, man, this weekend, I need to make time. We're all going to sit and watch it yet again.
That's right. So awesome. Grab the popcorn and the lightsabers, kids. Amiyrah, before we sign off, show number 139, talk to us about For Hats and Frugal.
Oh, lovely. Well, forhatsandfrugal.com is my website. I have been a blogger for a little over 10 years. And we talk about family food, a little fashion, personal finance. And we talk about our family life quite a bit, how we love to have fun together as a family, and we don't want to spend $1 million to do it. So we share that on the website. And from that, we've created a community of, small, young families really, who are just looking to have fun and really celebrate who they are as people and create a better life for themselves and their families. And we talk a lot about that on there. Obviously there's a little Star Wars sprinkle, a lot of Disney as well. We love Disney in general, but we're big Star Wars fans. So we talk about that over there as well. And, growing up Star Wars and raising Star Wars kids, they're something that we love to talk about as well. And we're homeschoolers too. So we dabble in that as well. And, we just love to really connect with families who embrace the idea of, growing a family is a fun thing. And as much as you can, have the real conversations and sometimes the tough conversations, it should always have a little lining of fun in there just to create memories with your kids and to create memories that are positive in your own mind as a parent. So that's what we do over there.
and do it better than anybody. And having had the good fortune of seeing you interact with your son, both on set and at the voiceover stuff that we did for the Target commercial, and just getting to get to know you over the years and see all those Star Wars things, it's really fun for me because you have such a wonderful, close family. And I know when you go and see some of these movies and you write the honest parent review, and I go to you first because I know that you're going to be honest and you have a love for Disney, but it doesn't even come close to the love you have for your children. And I appreciate that so much about you.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, I know how tough it can be, especially when it comes to things that we love. And, we obviously, all three of us love Star Wars so much, and that shouldn't keep us from making wise decisions when it comes to viewing the films and knowing what's age appropriate for your kids and if they're going to react to anything. So I try to keep it as honest as I can, even though, it doesn't matter if I'm invited to go see it or whatever. We need to stick together as parents. We need to be able to have information out there to help one another make good decisions for our kids.
That's exactly right. And where can everyone, you mentioned the website, of course, but where can people find you online if they want to ask you a question or just say hello?
Oh, sure. Well, you can go to the Four Hats and Frugal Facebook page. So that's just facebook.com/4 Hats and Frugal. I'm on there quite a bit. I do live streams on there, and we talk, and we have good conversations over there. If you want to chat with me on Instagram, I'm Amiyrah M. Last name is Martin, so Amiyrah M over there. Somebody's squatting on my name on Instagram, so I can't get the full name, but that's okay. Oh. And then on Twitter, I'm Amiyrah Martin over on Twitter. And I love tweeting. It's one of my favorite things, especially with fellow fans. So feel free to come on over, and we can have conversations over there about anything you want.
And Jared, where can people find you?
I'm on the Twitter, also known as a wretched hive of scum and villainy, at Jared Cantor, where when I do tweet, I tweet probably 99% about Star Wars and 1% about parenting, which for me is pretty much brings it back to Star Wars. So it's 100% Star Wars tweets.
Let's go ahead and take our last break. And when we come back, we will close out the show. This is Coffee with Kenobi.
Listening to Coffee with Kenobi, you are the podcast you're looking for. This is
Before we get to email, I want to thank our CWK sponsors, Harry's Razors, Mouse Fan Travel, and One Nation Coffee. Please support them the way they support our podcast. And remember to listen to new and archive shows of Coffee with Kenobi wherever you listen to podcasts, including Apple Podcasts, Podcast Addict, Stitcher, Spreaker, Overcast, Blog Talk Radio, Player FM, or our website, www.coffeewithkenobi.com. And if you listen to the show through iTunes, please leave us a review. We're also on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Pinterest, and Tumblr, and we'd love for you to check us out there. Also, be sure to listen to our CWK family of shows, including Legends Library, Rebels Reactions, Comics with Kenobi, and Lattes with Leia. Please leave a review for each of their shows as well, and be sure to subscribe to each of them individually, as they all have their own feeds now. Thank you so much again to Amiyrah Martin and Jared Cantor for joining us today on Coffee with Kenobi show number 139. In addition to the places I just mentioned for Coffee with Kenobi, you can also find me monthly on the podcast Looking at Lucasfilm, part of the Jim Hill Media Podcast Network. In fact, we just released a new episode a few days ago. And you can also find me on Twitter at Mr. Zehr, MRZEHR, and you can find my writings on CWK's website, as well as StarWars.com, where I am an official blogger there, and on IGN, where I contribute articles on Star Wars, as well as some other topics. I've done this show 139 Coffee with Kenobi episodes, and if you add all the other shows, we've had 232 shows. I don't think I've ever mentioned my own personal Twitter handle, which is crazy, so I thought I'd better remedy that. Thanks again for joining us, and don't forget to check out www.patreon.com/coffeewithkenobi to help support the show, as well as get access to podcasts not heard anywhere else. There are also t-shirts, coffee mugs, and more. Have a wonderful week, and I will see you next time. This is the podcast you're looking for.
This podcast is not endorsed by the Walt Disney Company or Lucasfilm Limited. It is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only. The official Star Wars website can be found at www.starwars.com. Star Wars, all names, sounds, and any other Star Wars-related items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Disney and their respective trademark and copyright holders. All original content of this podcast is the intellectual property of Coffee with Kenobi unless otherwise indicated.
This is the podcast you're looking for.